we are back. We have Superlubo versus Blanky now, and the players are already underway, so we're going to jump straight into the game. Uh, we
No
have,
delays. It's kind
yeah,
of nice.
uh, yeah. We have Superlubo on the top here, or sorry, Superlubo on the bottom here, and Blanky on the top. Just I'll just correct this overlay for a sec. But yeah, we have some picks and bans. Do you want to give us quickly what, let us know quickly what the picks and bans are for
Sure, let me
this
just
game?
pull them up quickly. Don't have them right here. However, we do have Superlubo who's got Rogue, Paladin, and Warlock. His Druid has been banned. And Blanky has got Rogue, Paladin, Shaman, with the Priest being banned. We can have a little chat about these picks and bans, just breaking it down possibly after this first game if there's a gap. But I mean, if we have a look here, Superlubo on the Rogue already. I mean, just have a look at his start here. He's got Prince Kel. He's got the coin Prince Keleseth, which is a really nice start here for him. I mean, those minions getting +1 is really important here, and I mean, he's also got the backstab, a really nice way to actually deal with a board like this.
Yeah, and he's obviously going to be bringing out that buffed up patches, which is really nice here.
Oh, the
With
Shadow
that,
Step.
yeah, a
Turn
little,
too late.
a little bit late, but he has still a pretty good turn. And honestly, he's still going to be able to shadow step that patches when he plays the South Sea Captain on 3. So that's still a pretty powerful pretty powerful play, and I don't think he's going to be too upset with that. So he could just go here with the hero power and the backstab to clear up this Flametongue Totem. He just wants to make sure that it doesn't get protected behind something like a Taunt Totem, as that would be a problem for him. Um,
Yeah, a Stoneclaw Totem would be quite devastating here because then he's going to have to waste 2 damage to try to get through that. Also, with that Stoneclaw Totem, then also having to attack to actually just deal damage and everything. So I think actually using the backstab now on the Flame Tongue Totem is pretty important.
Yeah, it is pretty important to get it out of the way. We can see Blanky's hand here is quite dead of minions too, so or quite dead of any real threat. So it looks like he's gonna probably have to just totem next turn. And now if he does get that Flame Tongue Totem, Super Lubo is gonna be pretty sad with life.
Ooh.
Thankfully for him, he didn't. Super Lubo was basically taking the risk that he would be able to get away with this kind of play instead, where he's just gonna use patches to clear up this Flame Tongue Totem. He could have also still Shadow Stepped the patches and cleared up both. So I suppose because of the double buff, the Keleseth and the Captain, it was going to be okay versus the um, Stoneclaw Totem as well.
Hmm.
And he kind of just went for the line that I suppose reduced the damage he was taking the most.
Yeah, so now as Blanky, do you consider using Jade Lightning here on the South Sea Captain just to reduce any more potential buffs, or do you maybe start do you develop this Jade Claw like he's just done here? I suppose it's all right. I mean, you do have the Maelstrom portal available, so it does allow you to at least do some trades here. And the Malkazar's Imp is not a bad drop from the Maelstrom portal there.
Yeah, it's just pretty good because of its stats. Do really well on the board here. Uh, Super Lubo does have the South Sea Deckhand that he can, sorry, the South Sea Captain that he can use again this turn to buff things up, to buff up this patches. That gives it the trade into the Malkazar Zimp. He can clear up the board totally if he wants to use the Shadow Step as well. He could also just go with this Tar Creeper, which is buffed up Tar Creeper thanks to that Prince Keleseth. It's pretty strong on the board here, and then he can just use patches to clear up the totem and clear up the 1-1 with his weapon. Or he can go for these Serenite Chain Gangs. Not quite as powerful immediately because they don't have that Killer Seth buff, but he can get some good value out of them. And here, Blanky going to be looking for that um, spell power totem roll if he wants to go with the Maelstrom portal. Whereas alternatively, he could go with the Jade Lightning. But when you're only clearing one half of the Serenite Chain Gang, it doesn't quite feel as good in terms of value.
Yeah, and I mean, you also don't really want to use the Devolve yet because that Serenite Chain Gang is basically like the Doppelgangster. It's really understated for its mana cost. But that Maelstrom portal working out really well there with the Wrath of Air totem coming out, and Blanky getting a little bit lucky there. being able to clear up its entire board now and is looking in a pretty good position. However, Superlubo is going to be able to just clear up that Malcazar's Imp with the last charge of his dagger, and they're just going to use the last 2 mana for his dagger mastery just to equip that 1/2 dagger once again.
Yeah, these Shadow Steps, they're going to be pretty valuable with the SS7 agent. They are really neat ways of clearing up totems, usually, because of SS7 agent's sort of combo effect, obviously very powerful. And when you're getting it essentially out for 1 mana with those Shadow Steps, it can be really good. The problem here is he can't actually use it cleanly here. He can only really play the SS7 agent once. But he still has a pretty decent way to deal with this board. He can play the captain here, use the SS7 agent to clear up the 2/2, and then just use his hero power to deal with the 1/1. And then he's got the board presence now to deal with these threats, and he doesn't have to go with the Shadow Step on the SS7 agent. The only well, the big downside of going with Shadow Step on the SS7 agent is, of course, that it loses that Keleseth buff. So,
Yeah.
when it comes down again, it'll only be a 3/3. But that's probably acceptable if he can get some good tempo usage out of it. As his next few turns are, or his next turn in particular, is looking a bit dead at the moment, as he just is 1 mana short of that Lich King, and he's going to need to draw something else to play. But for Blanky here, how much do you hate the naked doppelgangster?
I hate it just as much as I hate my food being late when I go to a restaurant and ordering a nice steak. It just feels so bad having to sit there and wait for something to happen. And I know it's
Ooh, this
yeah.
is this is nice though. With these SS7 agents, he can clear up these doppelgangsters really neatly. You can just shadow step this one, play it again, then play the second SS7 agent that's in his hand to clear up the other doppelgangster, and then he can clear off the primal fin totem with that captain, and then just use his dagger to clear off the Murloc itself. Now the big question is just does he want to kill either of these spell power or the healing totem as well? Because that's where he could use the second shadow step now. He will still even have enough mana to dagger afterwards, so it could be useful. But I kind of like just sticking with this board. If he does have something like Leroy, which is pretty common in these decks, then it is some extra value for Shadow Step later. Possibly even like Shadow Stepping a Bone Mare. But we can see he's going to get a little punished by it here, as leaving these totems up is going to allow Blanky to get some value from that Bloodlust. But his hand is so dead. He just keeps drawing these spells that are not really doing anything for him.
Yeah, the Evolve might be seeing play here,
Ooh.
considering that the Lich King has just come down, and the Evolve now. It's
Yeah,
like
it's
your
just
food arriving at your table just after you've left there.
yeah, it's just like another dead spell, and Superlubo got one of the best Death Knight cards in that Death and Decay, dealing 3 damage to all the minions, to all enemies. Sorry, in a against a deck like this Shaman is just so powerful. It will clear up pretty much all the totems. The only kind of board it's not going to clear up is one of those evolve boards, but Blanky still needs a second piece for that. He needs another. He needs to find a second doppelgangster here, or even something like Serenade Chain Gang to have a desperate attempt to come back into this game. As right now things are not looking good for him. Super Lubo here, he might want to just hold the Vile Spine Slayer, but with the Shadow Step in hand and the Death and Decay in his hand, he might just opt to rather push the extra 2 damage here. That's kind of all the Vile Spine is buying him. But it is another body on board, and that might be enough motivation for him to play it here.
I don't know if I really like doing it. I mean, we do have cast division, but I mean, the Valspine Slayer might just be used. I mean, you know that your opponent's playing the Evolved Shaman. So if he does get a Doppelgangster and he gets a big board and possibly a big taunt, you may want to use it. But Blanky just realizing that, those Evolves and Devolve in his hand just not going to do anything for him. And he's going to fall down here as Superlubo picks up the win here and takes a lead into this best of 5 series 1-0.
Yeah, and it's a good lead for Super Lubo to have there. Blanky really drew dead there with his Shaman, and
Oh,
his lineup looks like it might be a relatively aggressive lineup. He has Rogue, Paladin and Shaman available to him, and his Priest was banned. And Superlubo has Paladin and Warlock still remaining after his Rogue just got the win and his Druid was banned. So we could be seeing a relatively quick series here. Looks like both players might have brought some pretty aggressive lineups, and both players have been performing pretty well in previous weeks as well.
Yeah.
Superlubo is currently third, tied third with Prodigy, who we saw in our last series, for points. Both players from Bulgaria. And Blanky is just behind them in fifth, only 3 points behind. So it's a pretty important win here for either one of these players to either extend their lead over the other one in the top four, or for Blanky's case to push into the top four.
Oh man, Superlubo, unfortunately drawing the patches. He would have definitely been looking for a one drop, but that one drop definitely not the patches, as he does also have Prince Keleseth in his starting hand, which means that patches would have had a nice buff. So it could have been a nice surprise again with a South Sea captain or something, but unfortunately not going to be the case. As Prince Keleseth is going to come down here and it's going to start buffing that, and it's going to buff those minions in the deck. I mean, also picking up Saradite Chain Gang afterwards feels a little bit bad because, I mean, a 4 mana 2/3, for a 4 mana summon 2/2/2/3s. I mean, you could have had a 4 mana and 2/3/4s.
Yeah, 2-3-4 does sound a lot nicer simply because it's nice counting rather than 2-2-3. Uh, my slightly OCD-ness makes the 2-3-4 sound so much nicer. But yeah, Super Lubo here, he is still not in a bad position. Drawing patch is obviously also not great, but getting the Keller set down is super important in these matchups. And the other concern is though, the Rogue has the advantage in this matchup of having uh, the dagger as its hero power, which is so powerful. Obviously, in the long game, if both players are able to just trade resources, that's really where the Warlock's life tap can come into it. But until then, it's Blanky's hero power that's going to be much better here to help him control the board. And we can see how powerful a pirate start he's been able to get here as well. Those two South Sea captains doing amazing work for him here, making up for the fact that he hasn't been able to find that Keleseth. And we're going to see the Despicable Dreadlord come down now. That's still just going to basically clear up those patches, and then Blanky can kind of just trade his captain in and use the dagger, as well as just developing his own board here. Obviously, he kind of wants to use this captain, or he has to kill the Dreadlord with that captain there in order to avoid it just dying for free.
Yeah, both these players playing really quickly though as well. I mean, their turns have been very straightforward, but very little thinking. They're just seeing it, and a lot of snap plays here. Super Lubo off his draw has picked up the Darkside Councilman, which might be able to start doing a little bit of work here for him. Especially with this Tar Creeper coming down. I mean, Tar Creeper is going to be even more difficult to get through. A 4/6 basically contests the entire board here of Blankies.
Yep, but something it doesn't contest is Valspine Slayer. Apparently, plants in this case are going to be stronger than elementals, even though it could be an elemental that helps this plant kill this elemental in some uh, rather vicious semi-tribal warfare, as plants are not yet a tribe. One day we will have plant rogue where it is a tribe.
You really want Plant Rogue? You really want something like that to happen?
Okay, in the Kobolds and Catacombs introduction, there's like living mushroom things, and plant rogue could definitely be a thing. But moving on to realistic scenarios like this board state, we can see that Blanky has all this extra value from that Keleseth buff, but he hasn't really been able to turn it into any kind of tempo advantage, as the rogue has just had so many powerful tools like that Vile Spine last turn. That was just really huge for Blanky, basically allowing him to set up for a near lethal scenario next turn, especially with that Bone Man in his hand. Um, Superlubo can go for some defensive plays that will help him avoid dying here, but without clearing a fair bit of this board and or taunting up, he would just die to Blanky and the Bone Man next turn.
Yeah. So, things. There's just, oh.
So
Wait, I think
I
you
mean,
need to go for the Tar Creeper Voidwalker. I think it's just more minions.
I kind of like Doomguard Voidwalker because I feel like I like this because I feel like you need to clear off these minions. You can't really try and play too much for the value in your hand. That's not how you're going to win here. You need to be more aggressive on the board. So I really like that choice of minion usage there. And here for Blanky, he needs to. Well, he can use the Vilespine here to clear off either this Darkshire Councilman or the Doom Guard, especially after having already seen the Blood Reaver Gul'dan get discarded there. He doesn't have to worry about the Doom Guard coming back or anything like that. But he also just has Bone Mare on 7, which is traditionally a very powerful play. And I could definitely see him going with Bone Mare on this Flame Elemental and then just pushing Face for 6 here. He knows whichever minion is going to trade in is actually going to die. So it's not going to be giving or he's still basically going to be killing a minion with this buffed up Flame Elemental.
Yeah.
Alternatively, he can also go for the Swashbuckler and the Vilespine to clear off the minion, and then he can do some trades into the Voidwalker. But that kind of still leaves his board not that um, intimidating, and I kind of like going with the Bone Mare here. It gives you the 5/5, and it looks like he's actually going to make all the trades here. This does also make sense unless Superlubo is running Mortal Coil, something we have seen in a few Zoo decks. He's not going to have a nice, neat way to deal with this 5/1 and is kind of just going to have to trade in all his minions anyway. And this way, Blanky's actually be able to ensure a very powerful board from him. So I really like that line of play there.
Yeah, unless of course Superlubo is running the Mortal Coil, but it does mean he's going to have to tap. And I mean, already being on 12 HP against a rogue, where you know that they are running things like Vilespine Slayers, and even if you are able to play a taunt, you know that they're running a lot of low mana cost minions already. It just feels really bad to start tapping, especially being on 12.
I think if you have the Mortal Coil in the deck, he might have to tap. Uh, to have a realistic chance of winning, as he needs to kill these other minions efficiently. But it looks like even if he does have it, he didn't find it there. He's not going to get much value out of this Malkazar Zimp, but he can at least play it here. He can play the Malkazar Zimp, the Tar Creeper, and then use the Soulfire. But now he kind of has to Soulfire the 5/1 so that he can kill off the Bone Mare. And that really doesn't feel very good here. As he's just going to give up some very
Feels
valuable
bad, man.
resources. Yeah, and now with the Shadow Step, Blanky has a way to clear off both these minions. He can Shadow Step the Vilespine of his own, play the other Vilespine in his hand, and then just essentially play both Vilespines to clear and just push 3, which leaves him with a decent board. Alternatively, he can also just go for the Lich King this turn to try and guarantee that he gets that value. But I do kind of like the double Vilespine here. I think
Mhm.
it's pretty powerful. It's efficient use of your mana, and it leaves you with a pretty sizable board. Essentially 9 power against your opponent being on 7 health, and we've already seen a fair few taunts from Superlubo. So it has a decent likelihood of actually winning. Whereas here, by leaving these minions on the board, he is giving Superlubo some possible Bone Mare out, or at least
Mhm.
some Bone Mare value if the Bone Mare can land. But I suppose even if Bone Mare lands, he does have that Vilespine to just kill it anyway.
Yeah, this Doom God, I mean, being a 6/8 is not going to do much, as it's just going to die while trading into this Lich King. And that also just feels so bad because, he's falling so far behind, and now just gives him the Blanky the Trader with the South Sea Captain. Board is completely open for him to
And
just go and play this Leroy. And no,
Shadow Step
yeah,
in for lethal, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Shadow
so
Step for lethal.
Yeah, so I mean, managing to find enough value from the Shadow Step that he just sets up the lethal anyway here. But I mean, he would have had lethal either way he'd done that. Really, the thing was Superlubo had just lost so much health in that game to
Hmm.
Blanky's continued pressure that he wasn't able to find a way to grind out the value. Even though he found the Prince Keleseth, he wasn't actually able to turn that Prince Keleseth buff into enough value in his deck because he had some low tempo turns early on where he was just tapping instead of playing minions. And this matchup is just purely about fighting for the board, and that's something that the rogue can sometimes do better with cards like SI7 agents and backstabs, and it worked out really well for them as for Blanky there. And the Vilespine as well was absolutely clutch for him when he found it on turn 6
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, what also helps the rogue a lot is those shadow steps. The fact that it can bounce a card that's on the field back to your hand, reduce its mana cost by 2, It's a great way to activate a combo of a minion that you possibly already have on board, as well as possibly just activate even more battle cries or combos that you might have in your hand, like those SI7s or the Valspine Slayers. So the Rogue, as you mentioned, probably a little bit better than for fighting for board than the Warlock, as we're going into the third game with the series tied up at 1-1, if I can count at the moment.
Yes, it is tied up as
Okay, okay,
1-1, and this
okay.
is a very good start for the Warlock. Double Flame Imp on one, pretty powerful. Blanky also has pretty much the best start he could hope for as well, and it looks like he's running that Zubot list. We've seen this list get a little bit of love. Zubot's obviously able to buff up your Murlocs and Beasts. Usually not a lot of dragons in the deck, but he already has a Beast and two Murlocs here. So very much a menagerie paladin here. And what are your thoughts on just double flame imp here?
You're playing against a Murloc paladin, right?
Yeah.
And the biggest thing that you have to really be concerned about is by doing that, how do you get blown out? Considering that one, you're going to be taking 6 damage in your own turn. Yes, you're going to be developing flame imps, but how do you get blown out the water here by opponent playing minions that are going to contest the board? Like what we see in Blanky's hand, the Rockpool Hunter. So the choice of going for double flame imp, I don't know if I'm too happy about, but I'm definitely happy with playing the one and maybe saving the coin for the Tar Creeper next turn.
Yeah, I think saving the coin for Tar Creeper is definitely the consideration here, and I think the reason Superlubo is opting to just play the one, I feel like you get a little bit more blown out here by the uh, Rockpool Hunter though, when it comes down just to clear off your one minion on board. At least the other way around, he would have still been contesting the Rockpool Hunter with his Flame Imp, and he could have even gone for something aggressive enough, or as aggressive as, let's say, Soulfire to clear it off. But here he has been able to smooth out his curve a little bit, and obviously Tar Creeper is gonna contest this Rockpool Hunter nicely. But the thing is, Blanky doesn't really have to attack into the Tar Creeper. So Blanky can kind of just load his board to get some more value out of either the War Leader buff or the
Mm.
Zubot buff, and kind of buy a little bit more time against the Tar Creeper if Super Lubo was to go for that. Now Super Lubo goes for the Flame Imp and the Soulfire. This is the kind of play that makes me really think, why didn't he just go for the double Flame Imp last turn? He would have been in essentially the same position, except he would have dealt 3 more damage to Blanky here. And the only difference is you just wouldn't have the coin right now, I suppose.
Yeah, but maybe saving the coin for next turn. I mean, the Despicable Dreadlord coming out a turn earlier than what it's meant to can cause a little bit of problems. I mean, especially for the Murlocs. Often they also only have like 1 or 2 HP, so it would be able to do quite a considerable amount of work, considering the board state. But
I mean,
as you mentioned, these Tar Creepers, they're not as good in your own turn.
yeah, hiding the Dreadlord behind the Tar Creeper is pretty good, I suppose. But I'm not sure that was necessarily Super Lubo's plan, especially with the, playing the Soulfire. There was a decent likelihood he discarded either one of those kind of things. Maybe he was even wanting to discard the coin, but here he kind of needs it. He can just go with the Tar Creeper again, but as we said, Blanky can kind of just keep loading the board until he gets the critical mass of tribal synergy in order to trade favorably into these tar creepers, and that's something a lot of players I think sometimes just underestimate. And here I think the Dreadlord might have to be what Super Lubo goes for, especially with the War Leaders no longer buffing health. It means
Hmm.
another War Leader follow up here is not really going to be like healing this War Leader in any way. And this does set up next turn for the patches, because next turn you can just charge patches into the War Leader, and then the Despicable Dreadlord would finish it off.
Yeah, the Grimscale Chum pickup here for Blanky's not going to do that much work, if anything, because he doesn't have any warlocks, murlocs in hand. I just had a little bit of flashbacks from the original days of the murloc or the murlocs combined with the warlock hero
Yeah.
back in the day. Do you remember those good old days?
Yeah, that was kind of the first iteration of a Murloc tribal deck that we saw back when it was the Murloc Zoo, essentially, kind of uh, you know, uh,
Was it Reynad that kind of started that deck?
I'm not
I think
entirely.
it was.
It
I
it
think it
might
was
have
one of the
been.
original initiators of of a Zulok, if I'm not mistaken.
Well,
I think.
I mean
I
Zulok
could be wrong.
maybe I'm not sure exactly about the Murloc variant itself, but either way, here the Zoo bot is coming down. I'm not really sure what Blanky is hoping to do accomplish with that. He could have gone with the Galaka Crawler as well, which would have meant that he didn't guarantee the buff on the War Leader, I suppose.
Hmm.
Um, no, no, he would have. He could have just gotten the extra buff there. I was just double checking my how Zubat actually works, but it does buff both. It is an and. So a little bit curious there that he didn't just opt to play the Galaka Crawler. I mean, sure he can get some value from the patches at some point, or from eating a pirate, but like the Warlock doesn't tend to play that many pirates, which is why you kind of tend to see it drawing patches a lot more often. Usually it's just the Blood Cell Corsairs or the Captains and patches. So I'm not a huge fan of keeping the Galactic Crawler there. I think I would have preferred for him just to play it and load the board up with some more minions.
Yeah, the Glacial Shard here also really nice here for Superlubo. He could actually go really wide if he wanted to play the Glacial Shard as well and just free his face.
Yeah, I like this.
Going to be protecting his Despicable Dreadlord as well as that 3/1 now Tar Creeper.
Yeah, whilst also just protecting your Tark Reaper and meaning your Dreadlord's end of turn ability next turn can be more powerful if you just have that Dreadlord to trade. You also get the extra 2/1 on board, which can really help your trades as well, especially once again to set up for the Despicable Dreadlord's ability. So I really like getting the Glacial Shard down there and not trying to be like, let's say, too greedy with it, expecting that you were going to hit maybe a much more valuable minion. And that's a huge draw here for Super Lubo. Doom got exactly what he would like. This means he can cleanly clear off this Cobalt Scalebane and just push face for the rest. And now his board is looking really scary. And Blanky is going to need to find something like a Consecration, but I'd be very surprised if he actually had a Consecration in his deck.
I must say, it's one card that we've seen falling out quite often. Is that it used to be in Paladins quite a lot. I mean, the 4 mana deal 2 damage to all enemy characters used to be so strong, but a card that we are seeing less and less play of, and is often not even seen in the Murloc Paladins as well.
Yeah, it's a card that pretty much only sees play in control paladin lists these days. Occasionally some mid-range paladin lists, especially with Killer Seth running around. There's a lot of times when the health of minions actually exceeds the 2 damage that Consecration does. So it's not a great place right now for Consecration. And uh, Blanky here just goes for the Sunkeeper Tarium as a way to try and reduce the power on the board and give him some extra options going forward. But the Despicable Dreadlord's ability is still going to be somewhat useful here, but that would mean that Super Lubo wouldn't be able to actually get in any damage with his other minions if he just trades 2 into this Sunky Batarium and then waits for the Despicable Dreadlord's end of turn effect. It'll kill the Dreadlord, kill the Sunkeeper, but he is kind of missing 3 damage if he maybe just traded all 3 in.
Yeah. Rockpool Hunter going to come down and the Gentle Megasaur. This is going to be pretty big. This Discover is going to really need to pay off here. +3 attack, +3 health, and the Divine Shield. I'm not too sure which one is the best one. Probably just the Divine Shield, allowing you to maybe just bump into this Tar Creeper and still keep your 4/3 alive.
Yeah, I mean the Divine Shield not that great against the Dreadlord, but it is pretty good for contesting the board, especially after that Sunky Batarium kind of evened up the power of the minions on board. And now Super Lubo is reaching the point where his hero power is going to be pretty impactful. He just needs to make sure that he doesn't uh, lose over the next few turns, and make sure that he doesn't lose the board too much, and then his hero power is going to be really effective. And we've already seen how powerful Blood Reaver Gul'dan is. In this case, it's also going to be bringing back the Doom God and the Despicable Dreadlord. And I think the first Doom God was discarded, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah,
From the
first one was discarded.
Soulfire. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
so
so
what is
it's only going to be
discarded?
bringing
So
back the one.
yeah, because the discard doesn't just doesn't destroy the minion. It more just like puts them in a place where they're never going to see the light of day until the next game.
Well, yeah, most importantly, they don't count as died if they've been
Yeah.
discarded from hand. They never lived, so they could never die.
Yeah, just they never live so they can't die. You're just putting them back into the box without even seeing any more further play here.
What has
As the Cairn just going to be trading away there. The Despicable Dreadlord of Power will go off. I don't see why Superlubo would not play this Malkazar's Imp. I mean, it's just down. You do have the Blood Reaver Gul'dan in hand, so we'll be able to come back as well.
Yeah, you may as well get it down for the value now. Um, just so that, yeah, when you do play the Blood River Gul'dan, you get even more back. Even just the 1/3 can be relevant to deal with a lot of the hero powers, a lot of those little Silverhand recruits from Blanky. So there is definitely some power in going with Malkazar's Imp here.
Yeah. So Blanky also picking up that Blessings of Kings. It opens up some options here with regards to trades. Maybe getting rid of this Despicable Dreadlord. I mean, it's been around here for a while, and I mean, the end of turn effect may not seem that great now, but eventually it can just start adding up. I mean, it's taking 1 health away from your minions all the time, and it can just eventually just be too much that you can't really recover from it eventually.
Yeah, the Despicable Dreadlord is really powerful, especially against a deck like Paladin as well, where you're always killing off their dudes.
They're
The
dudes.
Their dudes, yeah, the
They're
Silverhand
dudes.
recruits, affectionately
The
known
silver
as
hand dudes.
dudes.
Yeah.
Uh, when you're always killing them off, it's even more powerful because you're basically denying your opponent's hero power, which is pretty good. So, speaking of pretty good, Bone Mare is also pretty good, and here it's gonna allow him to actually deal with this buffed up Gentle Megasaur if he wants, or he could even just Bone Mare and go face here. I actually really like Bone Mare face because it sets up for Blood Reaver Gul'dan to be lethal next turn, and the chances that your opponent's able to kill you are relatively low, even though they can get through the Bone Mare Cairn quite effectively. They are then only realistically going to be able to push 10 damage. So I really like Bone Mare and go face here. I think that's probably the right move from Superlubo, and it looks like he also sees that line. The Blood River Gul'dan basically just lethal next turn, and now there is no real way that Blanky can get out of this. He can
Yeah.
clear this board, except for the Ken, or the Bane actually, which is so like even without the Blood River Gul'dan, this is just lethal here as the Bane would be enough, and Blanky now sees that and is going to go ahead and concede as Superlubo goes up 2-1 in the series.
Yeah, Superlubo looking really strong there with the Warlock, really playing the to the strengths of the deck. I mean, the Zoolock really requires the board control. It really requires being able to pick up value trades and maintaining that board control going forward. Otherwise, it can lose fairly quickly.
Mm.
But there are a couple of comeback mechanics, especially if you're able to drag it out to the end game with that, say, the Blood Reaver Gul'dan, being able to swing everything into your favor along with those Doom Guards that can come out from the effect. It's a really nice comeback mechanic for the Warlock as we're going into the fourth game here with Superlubo on his Paladin, the Murloc Paladin, as that we can see, and then we've got Blanky on the Shaman.
Yep, and this is kind of a matchup that has been around for a while. We saw this even before Knights of the Frozen Throne. It was quite a popular matchup, one that was quite well favored for the Shaman because of the power of Devolve against tribal synergies, removing essentially the tribal buffs. It can be very powerful, and it can allow the Shaman to have a lot or some really big swing turns, especially with Devolve and Maelstrom Portal when they're combined together. So this is a matchup that Blanky should be feeling pretty good about. But Super Lubo is 2-1 up here and is going to have at least 2 shots with this Paladin. And at worst case, he has the mirror. So I think Super Lubo is still also going to be feeling pretty good.
Yeah, this is the evolved shaman, and considering your knowledge of this kind of matchup, who do you feels a little bit favored, especially considering the start by both of these players here?
Well, yeah, I mean, as I was saying, traditionally the Evolved Shaman was favored, and that was largely before the Murloc War Leader nerf even. So now sometimes you don't even need the uh, the devolve in order to clear some of the Murloc boards up, as maybe just spell power plus your Maelstrom portal can be enough. Uh, Superlubo does have a better start here though. The Valfen Inquisitor pretty good on turn one. He went with that over the Tidecaller because it matches up better against cards like that Jade Claws that we do see Blanky has in his hand. So that was a smart choice from him here, and he's just going to try and load the board with Murlocs to prepare for that Murloc War Leader into Gentle Megasaur curve. But Blanky now, with drawing that second Jade Claws, I imagine he is going to want to use the one here, and he can coin out the Bloodsail Corsair here. It obviously does have a lot of value against Paladin to remove weapons, but he might be tempted enough to do it just for the patches here, as that allows him to clear up this uh, Valfen Inquisitor as well with the Jade Claws. But he could also opt to just attack into the Valfen now, and that sets up for the Maelstrom portal next turn, although it does make that a little bit obvious.
Yeah, it'll make it pretty obvious, which means Superlubo probably won't go for the play that Blanky will be baiting for, especially after the nerf of the Murloc War Leader. No longer buffing the Murlocs by +2/+1, but just rather the +2/+0 now.
Yeah, and that makes a huge difference because there's no way uh, for the Murloc Paladin to kind of play around that Maelstrom portal so much anymore with just the Murloc War Leader buff. It can if it gets health from something like a Gentle Megasaur, but Super Lubo is not necessarily going to have time for that. And Blanky does go for the play that makes his next turns less flexible in a way. If he wants to use that Maelstrom portal next turn, now he has to hit the Vile Spine in order to kill it. Whereas if he'd done it the other way around, he might have taken one more damage, but he would have at least allowed himself to be able to use the Jade Claws maybe somewhere else, or uh, giving himself a little bit more options with the Jade Claws in order to use this, in order to clear the board. But now with Super Lubo going with the Caller instead, we could just see Blanky use the Jade Claws to kill that, and maybe even just play his second Jade Claws now, as he doesn't really have the greatest other options. No real other minions in hand except that Bloodsail Corsair, which he seems determined on saving for now, or the Manatai, which would have just died on board there, that were at least playable minions.
Yeah, so Gentle Megasaur going to come down here. +3 health, +3 attack, and poisonous. Do you think it's worthwhile taking the health here?
Health is nice in the sense that it allows him to make trades, but the two minions he has on board are not exactly the most valuable. That with the low base attack they have here, the plus attack does seem kind of tempting. Obviously, it gets a little bit more blown out by cards like Maelstrom Portal. Um, so he's just going to go for the health here. This will obviously try and set up better for either the second Megasaur or the Murloc War Leader next turn. And here, Blanky is actually doing pretty well on his Jade count. Up to 3/3 Jades already, thanks to the double Jade Claws early opener. And now he's actually contesting the board pretty well. But Super Lubo might just be tempted to go for the War Leader here, as it does allow him to clear off the 3/3. Once again, that War Leader nerf and the reduced, or the fact that it doesn't give health anymore, means that he can't play the Tidecaller alongside it here, in order, because the Tidecaller is once again still vulnerable to the Jade Claws. So it is quite awkward here. But now the Maelstrom Portal looks pretty good. Patches is even an option as well, to clear up the War Leader here, but I imagine this is a pretty good turn for him, and rather ironically, they're getting a Murloc of his own from that Maelstrom portal.
Yeah, however, this is possibly where things are going a lot more in Blanky's favor, because from here it just seems very difficult for Super Lubo to come back into this game.
Yeah, this, like a lot of these matchups we've seen in this series in particular, it's really all about fighting for the board. A lot of these kind of zoo-esque decks, that is really their main focus, and the Shaman does have some really good ways to come back when it's behind, these Maelstrom portals and stuff that we are seeing. So when it gets ahead, it can sort of assert that lead even more, and the Paladin does kind of struggle sometimes, without cards like Consecration. When we saw it in the previous game where it was the paladin that was kind of struggling to come back against the zoo, I think it was.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was against the zoo. Basically, what the paladins really struggled to come back to board. But this is a big turn here for Blanky. The doppelgangster evolve is really nice.
Ooh.
Ooh, Hogger is absolutely incredible. Those 2/2 taunts that's going to be generated every single turn are so big and so important here. Even though it's
Yeah.
just able to be cleared up now, I mean that is still a pretty serious board to try and deal with. And I mean, if Blanky has got another option here, maybe after doing a trade or two, keeping maybe his 6 mana 6/6 alive, he could consider playing the Thrall Death Seer here.
Yeah, he could. It's pretty good, I suppose, to keep the 6 to sort of just evolve the 6/6 here. He could also go with. He can also just play the two 1 drops then if he wants to evolve them into 3 drops. Trade the 4/4 off here. It does seem quite clean to go with that. He could also even go with a Bloodlust here. Uh, Bloodlust would allow him to also keep that 6/6 alive, but keep it alive on full health and allow him to push. He can use the patches from hand to clear off this Murloc, and then he can either take the value trade with the 6/6, or he can kill it with the buffed up Ivory Knights. But it looks like he's probably going to go with this double 1 drop and Thrall option here. Because obviously you really want to use the Bloodsail Corsair because you don't really want to miss out on an extra 3 drop here.
Yeah, I mean the 3 drop could be pretty big here for him as we're going to see this evolve come out now. Oh,
Wow.
Tyrion is who's the paladin now,
And
Super Lupo?
right before Superlubo was going to play his own Tyrion, rather suspicious. But yeah, Superlubo now in a lot of trouble because of Blanky having those extra minions. It means he can just trade so much more favorably with the Tyrions. Superlubo can't just play his Tyrion here. Otherwise, Blanky just trades the Edwin and then uses his Tyrion's Divine Shield to kill Superlubo's Tyrion. So I mean, that's such a powerful turn. We can also see that Blanky does even have the option to go with the Devolve here. Something I imagine he is probably going to go with because of how powerful it is to deny the Paladin the Ashbringer weapon here. And this also means he can actually keep his minions alive a bit. And with this Bloodlust, he has 11 plus 6, 17 damage. So not quite enough for lethal, but with the Firefly, he is going to be able to go even wider on board. And this is going to look pretty good for him. He can just evolve this Edwin here. Uh, or he's going to evolve the uh, Captain here,
Oh, a
which
little bit of a low roll.
could have been it could have been worse, but well, I mean, it was more likely going to be worse than evolving the Edwin there. But the reason he did it was maybe just to play around the Galaka Crawler to have a higher percentage chance of guaranteeing he has a minion on board next turn for that Bloodlust. I think that's largely his motivation for going with it, for going for that evolve rather than on the Edwin.
Yeah. However, has Blanky not got lethal now with this Bloodlust? No, he
Uh,
doesn't. Because he's going to have to burn through 6 damage first, so that's kind of
yeah.
saving him here. Um,
He might still be tempted to go with the. I suppose he only really costs him 1/1 drop here, so I think he can take the trade with the Tyrion, the value trade there, and just one of the 1/2s into the 2/1 here, and then just push face with the rest. And now he will probably evolve the Edwin this time, um, but he can also just push a lot more damage face with the Bloodlust now. It's unlikely the Paladin is going to have any way to deal with the board, but he could be a little bit concerned about something like a Primordial Drake, especially after having seen that Curator come down this turn. The Primordial Drake could have been a possibility, and here he's just going to, I imagine, actually just push everything to face. It does make you a little weaker against something like Sunkeeper Tarim, but it's difficult to pass this extra 5 damage that you can push to face here.
he's going to go for the trade. That's a very interesting play, especially after using the Bloodlust and everything. I definitely would have suspected him to just rather push face and putting his opponent onto 3 HP. It just seems a little bit better. I mean, we can see that Super Lubo doesn't really have a way to come back into this game, if at all.
Yeah, and
But
I think
you've given your opponent a lifeline.
I think that's largely why he went with that. He couldn't necessarily think of a way that Superlubo was going to be able to come back into the game, especially after having already seen Tyrion. And he was more concerned about getting blown out by like a um, maybe
Oh.
a buff plus the uh, Curator, sorry, the Primordial Drake or something like that.
Mm.
That's maybe the one way he could have been a bit blown out there. But Blanky is going to be able to tie up this series at 2-2 now as he manages to get the win there. And now he is only going to have his Paladin left. So this series is just going to come down to a Paladin mirror.
Yeah, and in these kind of mirrors, it comes down to who's able to get the really good starts, who's able to maintain board control, and specifically also looking at that Murloc synergy. I mean, it can also just come down to who gets the better Gentle Megasaur.
Yeah, it's really the early curve that's important here, and I imagine both these players will mulligan very aggressively for their early curve. I imagine both players will probably keep the Grimscale Chum, and yeah, no surprise to see Super Lubo mulligan the rest of his hand. That's not really the kind of opening hand he's looking for, but Coin Rallying Blade can be sometimes decent, and Blanky here actually full kept because he had this kind of neat curve, and it's working out well for him. Here, it looks like the Murloc War Leader is a nice pickup to get that value from the Grimscale Chum's battle cry. And now Blanky does still have the Rallying Blade, but it's not even going to be enough to kill this War Leader if it does come down, as the War Leader will be a 4-4 thanks to that Grimscale Chum buff. And here, Blanky, I think Noble Sacrifice is traditionally very powerful in this matchup, but Redemption can be almost just as powerful. And if the minions you're going to be resurrecting are going to be 2 power or more, because your opponent's likely going to want to trade into them again anyway. So it does look like he goes for the redemption here because it kind of seems just as good, basically.
Yeah, Super Lubo though, I really would like to see him coin out this Rallying Blade. What it will possibly do against Blanky as well is that it'll put some doubt in his head about the possible plays that he's going to be able to have come future turns. Just being able to set that up, clearing out that hydrologist that is at 3-3 at the moment, just seems
Yeah.
so good because you can then follow it up with say the war leader, and hopefully you curve out there from that point onward into a maybe a Megasaur, maybe even a Valfen Inquisitor or something.
Yeah, you're right. Just playing the Rallying Blade here allows him to basically preemptively protect his Murloc War Leader from almost anything Blanky would play this turn. There's not
Yeah.
really any 3-4s traditionally in these Paladin decks, so it kind of looks like it'll protect him. And here, Blanky is going to go with a Redemption, because once again, largely this is like a Noble Sacrifice in a way. Except that in this case, it's going to just leave him with the 2-1 on board rather than leaving him with the 2-3 on board, which is obviously worse. But, Super Lubo might just be forced to test this because there's probably not going to be a better use for or a better way for him to test the secrets anyway. So he just goes with the weapon here. And now Blanky does have a clear thanks to that Galaka Crawler's redemption.
Yeah, and Super Lubo going into turn 4. There's going to be very little that he can possibly do this turn. I say that, and he gets the Murloc Warley or Tidecaller,
That's a
as
great
well as
pickup.
this Cold Lights here. And as you just said, a great pickup. All of a sudden, the million that you thought wasn't going to be that strong, all of a sudden becomes a 2-4. And with that Finja in hand as well, we could start seeing Super Lubo potentially run away with this game. However, it's still very early here. Both players pretty equal still on resources.
Yeah, but the Fincher into Bone Mare curve is really powerful. You just need to find something else to do in that turn 6 to kind of give your
Megasaur.
yeah, to give yourself an option where you don't necessarily have to unstealth the Fincher, but this is you kind of want to be as ahead as possible on board at that stage. And here, Blanky also managed to find his own Murloc Tiecaller, and here he's going to play that and the War Leader down. And if Superlubo just plays the Fincher here, he gets a really good trade on this Murloc War Leader of Blanky's here. So that's a pretty good turn for him. And now the Valfen is actually a good filler as well for that turn 6 because you can double hero power essentially with the Valfen Inquisitor.
Yeah, Blanky, if he doesn't trade, Jay, will be in a lot of trouble. But he does eventually go for the trade there. Ooh, even Blessing of Kings opens up a few options here. Um,
The big concern with Blessing of Kings is that you're not playing around something like Sankey Batarium at all, as you're going to end up just leaving your opponent's minion on board anyway, even if Blessing of Kings and then trade it. So the 1-1 could just end up clearing your um, Finja after Sankey Batarium, but he can also just get in the hero power or the Valfen Inquisitor here. Um, and I suppose with the effect from the Fincher, he is kind of playing around Tarim in the sense that he does get the extra minions on board. But once again, Bone Mare here or Tarim would have allowed him to actually clear off the Fincher here, and the Bone Mare is going to be the card that Superlubo is going to find. And now Bone Mare, he who Bone Mare's second wins. Some people are of that school of thought, and it looks like that is going to be the case here for Superlubo, as his second bone, or him being able to bone mare second here, has been really powerful. But now, uh, usually,
oh,
on the other hand, playing Tyrion first is generally pretty good. But here, the Murloc War Leader also a really big pickup. Superlubo didn't have the cleanest turn with just the Tyrion, and now the War Leader can actually help him clear off this Tyrion in a much cleaner way.
yeah, going to be a very nice cleanup here. Using the 3/3 to pop the Divine Shield. He could then use his taunted Valfen Inquisitor to clear up, and he's going to be able to push 12 damage to face and really put Blanky on the back foot here. But he left on 8, looking down this kind of board, and also that taunt. With the Divine Shield, there's very little you can do. I don't think there's anything Blanky can do there. And he does end up conceding, and that is going to be Superlubo picking up the series here 3-2. Really, really well played by him. And this Murloc Paladin mirror really came down to him just seeming to get a little bit of a better start. Well,
Yeah, Yeah, and it's a very important win, Going back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of the standings and how qualification works in this ESL Southeast Europe Championship, uh, the players score points based on how they finish in each of the 4 qualifiers, and this is the third qualifier already. We've seen Super Lubo do really well, especially last week he finished second. So he got quite a decent amount of points from that. And now he's going into the top 4 again. And the other important part is Blanky was only 3 points behind him, but now it's going to
mm,
be much more difficult for Blanky to catch up. He's going to need a really good performance tomorrow in the final qualifier in order to break that top 4. Whereas Super Lubo here is able to kind of reassure his spot in that top 4, and he's going to be, I think, one of the first players to actually make the top 4. After we had a relatively quick game
mm.
there with those very aggressive tempo-oriented or board-oriented decks.
Yeah, busy just having a look now to see if there are any other games available. Unfortunately, there's not. The Ryuk versus Felzak game is still on. The Ram MBG and Zuka 93 is still on. Obviously, we've seen Super Lubo take up the win. And Charles Wu versus Cheesehead is also currently underway. That is the quarterfinals. Obviously, Super Lubo going through to the semis. So in terms of his points already, he's going to be pretty chuffed with this. Definitely from the semis, you really want to try and get into the finals because the
Mm.
points spike once again, with first place picking up 100 points as well. So
Yeah,
pretty
and
important from this point onwards.
for him, if Chazul wins his game, then he will be up against Chazul in the next round, and that's quite important as Chazul is currently the top ranked player with 105 points after winning the first qualifier and then getting 5 points only from the second one. It still left him as the top position overall, and I think he's the only other one in the top 4 that's still in it. Oh no, the Prodigy is still in it as well today. Um, so yeah, Prodigy and Chazul are the only other 2 in the top 4. So if any of those players make it through to the finals, and especially if they win, they pretty much gonna guarantee themselves a spot in the top four on points. So it's really important for these players. You want to get that out of the way as early as possible so that you don't have all the stress and nerves going into the last week or the
Yeah,
last
I mean,
qualifier tomorrow.
yeah, I mean, like nerves can often cause you to not play as optimally as you should. But ladies and gentlemen, that is going to be our game. We're going to see if we're able to jump into another game. If not, we will just let everybody know that unfortunately there's not going to be another game that's part of the the round of eight, the quarterfinals, and we'll just let you know exactly who we will be doing then in the semifinals. So don't go anywhere. We'll be back shortly.
Yeah, in the meantime, enjoy the video and the music. We'll be back. And also remember to type exclamation mark giveaway to find out more information about winning that ESL Pro chair.
Yeah.